Welcome to Let's Take a Walk, brought to you by the Feld Group Institute. In today's episode, Charlie Feld shares a story that sits at the heart of everything we teach about transformation, but one that began with uncertainty, humility, and an honest recognition that something was missing. What follows is an origin story of a pivotal partnership and a powerful reminder that meaningful change does not begin with technology or strategy. It begins with people. As you listen, consider where you may need to pause, reflect, and find the person or people who can help you see what you cannot see alone. Here's Charlie.
When I left Frito-Lay, I was pretty imbued with myself because we had put handhelds on route trucks and won awards and got ourselves very well publicized. And, on the one hand, I was a little bit bored with Frito-Lay because we had conquered the big thing over the decade or 11 years that I had been there. And that was Salesforce automation and all of the things that went along with putting handhelds on route trucks. And that's when I decided that I really wanted to go into business for myself and do turnarounds. I really enjoyed the first few years at Frito when things were not running smoothly, when we couldn't figure out what to do. But the years of figuring out what to do and then getting it going were very exciting for me. The years of actually implementing it and then taking the bows and receiving the awards were less interesting to me. So I wanted to not go to another corporation because I love PepsiCo. I didn't want to really leave Frito-Lay or PepsiCo, but I wanted the opportunity to go into places that had big challenges, couldn't figure out what to do, healthy, successful companies with unhealthy IT. And I got my opportunity to go into Burlington Northern as the first contract that I got in the Feld Group. And it was 1992. And I went in with a pretty big head, thinking that this wasn't going to be very hard. And I spent the first year kind of learning about the railroad and I was really shocked at how complicated it was because it was a systems business. If something didn't go right in Montana, you had trouble in Chicago and Fort Worth within hours because the rail was connected. And if a bridge went out, you had trouble everywhere. Different than Frito-Lay, if a plant went down, you still had inventory on the shelf. In the stores, you had inventory on the trucks, you had inventory in the distribution centers, you had inventory in the manufacturing plants. So the plant could go down, and 3 days later, it might cause a problem that you'd even see. And I was already 1 year into it, and I kind of knew what I had to go do, but because of the complexity of the railroad, I was not ready to really begin the transformation. And I felt like I had to go find people to bring into Burlington Northern that I could have on my team that knew the railroad business. Otherwise, I'd spend another year trying, not that I couldn't learn, but, and that's when CSX, which was another railroad, was cutting back on their staffing. They were a pretty successful railroad, but they were cutting back on IT staffing and cutting costs. So I got the opportunity to fly to Jacksonville, Florida, and meet people that wanted to change and were willing to possibly join an adventure like the Feld Group as opposed to another company. And I went there and I met people like Stan Alexander and, 4 or 5 others. And once Stan joined the Feld Group, he became the architect of the solutions and, kind of saved my life. And he really changed the whole game of the first success that we had as a Feld Group. And that was a major pivot point for us. And then, the second pivot point was we were making progress in the second year of the transformation because of people like Stan and the way it was architected, and we got a merger and an acquisition with the Santa Fe, and I got what I would call a mulligan. I got a do-over. Now I had 2 years to do a transformation in a very tight window that was forced by the commitment to the federal agencies that we would get the synergies and we'd get the merger done in 2 years. So taking everything I had learned in the first 2 years, plus a team of people that now, led by Stan's architecture, were ready for a true transformation that was pretty stunning. And that became our model, 2 years to transform. So when I went to Delta Airlines, we had already built the framework to not be walking around for a year or two trying to figure out what to do, but get in there and figure out in 90 days what we had to go do. And then in 90 days, begin the effort and get going so that after 2 years, we really had pace on this thing. But none of that would have happened if I just had not connected with the right people. So those
You went down to Florida, and you said you went to Florida and you met with several people.
Right.
And I know this was a long time ago, but you picked Stan.
Well, they actually came as a group because it was called the Jacksonville Five, and it was 5 people. So Stan was one of them, but he was the one that really understood architecture. I had a person at Frito-Lay, Robert Hawkins, that understood architecture. I mean, there were better executives and leaders, but Robert understood how everything fit together and how the business architecture and the technical architecture needed to work. And I was missing that at the railroad. I could have gone into any snack food company or any consumer goods company and taken that architecture and that model and modified it. But the architecture of a railroad, the business model and the business architecture is so different. But Stan was a great architect. He was probably 28 years old and, very articulate, fun to be around, and just, became, a major part of the way I learned to think about problems and the way I attack problems. Stan is a good listener. I'm not such a good listener. Stan is a good architect. I really see patterns, but he can take them deep, right? So we became like alter egos of each other, and he didn't like the politics and the selling and all the stuff that I like to do, and I didn't like all the minutia and detail and sitting through hours and hours and hours worth of listen to people grind away at small details, but together. Now, I mean, over the years, we found more Stans, right? And we found more, diverse personalities, but the way we put together teams, that became the model for what made the Feld Group successful, just like the model of what made Frito-Lay successful were, carried into the Feld Group, and now the Feld Group is carried into the Feld Group Institute. And all of the learnings of 40 years is now piled into these different offerings we have. And, again, every company is different, but once you've seen an airline, you've seen an airline. Once you've seen a railroad, you've seen a railroad. Once you've seen a consumer goods company, and they all have variations, and you just have to figure it out. But, learning about building and leveraging patterns as opposed to starting from scratch, having time boxed, outcomes that you're looking for to keep the pace on things, recognizing that, there are multiple models from business models to systems models to technical models to organization, economic and operating is one thing, but really understanding how they connect to each other and how the essential, and everybody kids me about it, but the essential model is the organizational model, because if you don't get that right, nothing matters. And within the organization model, you have structure, leadership, culture, and workforce. And of that set of models, the leadership and culture matter the most. So if you go in with the right leadership team and they care about each other and they're knowledgeable, right, they'll figure out the capability architecture, they'll figure out the technical architecture. And all that was learned because I was in failure mode in the first year of my first assignment that when I started the Feld group, and I got lucky enough. First, I was fortunate to recognize I was in failure mode. I went from being king of the hill to failing. Although I wasn't failing yet, I didn't see an answer after a year, and that was not going to be good because it was so complicated. But because I recognized it and because I knew I needed help, right, I went after people that I thought could help me. And that became the fulcrum of a major turn that got me on a path that's had a 40-year run after that, 30 plus years.
Right. I was going to say, so if you picked up Stan in the early 90s?
Yeah, 93.
You picked up Stan in 1993.
Yeah.
So 30 years ago.
Right.
And I'm sure you had a call with him this week.
Yeah. 10. And even when Stan left and went to operating models, we stayed in touch. But Stan's DNA gave me a model to go after. So we have, people like Russell and Vivek and Brent and Mike. And, you got to have people that know what they're doing. The Stan was just, the model of the kind of technical skills, personality skills, cultural skills that you need for strong leaders that are just because you're strong technically doesn't mean you can't be a good leader, articulate, able to care about people, right? So he became the model that we modeled after. So it became no longer me or Stan or me and Stan. It became all of our CIOs and all of their chief architects and CTOs, right? It became a model, not so much the person.
Stan as an original game changer in a moment where you could have faced something very different moving forward. You recognized in yourself something that was missing and were able to find it in somebody that not only helped you solve an immediate problem, but made you stronger and look at things differently on so many different levels.
Right. It's not about me or Stan. It's about those skills, personality. That's the problem that, I'm going to do a third, and a third of your team. Who are the third that you would take with you to the next place? Who are the third you wish would walk in and just quit? And who are the third are you willing to work with, right? Because you don't have a Stan, right? You don't have a leader that understands these modern architectures. You don't have people that buy into your program. And you look at them and you say, those people don't have a chance of implementing a complex federal model, right? And it just flows downhill. So you get to a place where you got a great vision, but you couldn't possibly execute it. The same thing's true.
Is that what you felt like when you were at BNSF? Like you said, hey, I know what I need to be doing, but I can't possibly do it?
Yeah, I figured out what needed to happen. The technology was beginning to show up, but there was a team of people that hated each other. I had 11 direct reports. I fired 10 of them on one day. Right? I mean, and this was as I approached my first year, not my first 90 days, but I kept talking to the senior leadership team about two things. One, they don't have the skills to do this job. Two, they don't have the personalities, right, to play together. They blame each other. So as soon as one leaves my office, another one comes in to complain about the other one. It's never going to work. And they said, well, why don't we just go to all of them? Do you have replacements? And I said, well, I have a few that are the next level down that I'd pull up. I have a couple of additional Feld group people, and I could build a team within a quarter. So the head of HR and I went up to St. Paul. We walked them each into the room. They all knew it was coming. It wasn't a surprise. They got a nice package. And they all left quietly. And the head of HR and I flew back to Fort Worth after we did that, because the IT group was predominantly in St. Paul, where the headquarters used to be before they moved to Fort Worth. And we went to a Christmas party, got there about halfway through the party, and we walked in and everybody was cheering for us. What a great thing, what a great, And we were so worn out and beat. I mean, I didn't even want to go. I told Jim, I just want to go home. He said, no, we got to go. But we were both drained. I mean, I had let some people go in my life, but not 10 in one day. It was just so draining. And we walked in and I walked over to him and said, look, if everybody knew this, why did you keep not doing anything? He said, well, that's how things are in the railroad. Reagan had deregulated the railroads in the mid-'80s. This was 92. So it was the first time anybody had to worry about being anything. It was almost like a semi-government company. If your prices went up, the government just said, okay, raise your price, right? Because it was captive. If you wanted coal from the Powder River Basin, you were going to the BN, whether they serviced you or not. It was such a weird thing after coming out of a snack food company that was, you don't deliver good product, they don't buy it, right? So that they were into real change. And so we changed it up, and Stan came in, and we found other people in the organization to pull up, and we filled the 10 jobs. Those were early experiences.
I like that story in particular because it stems from that time where success wasn't necessarily like as you said, you were on the mountaintop, and then you were faced with something very different, and not guaranteed. And it took something different. Yep. And it took finding the stands. And there's so many in our community that I think are faced with those same decisions that, or in that same position where they cannot necessarily see forward. But as you said, when you come back to that org model and you find the people, then there are then opportunities that you maybe couldn't see before. So I think it's a good look at Stan, which is fun for us to see. But overall, something that I think our community and others can reflect on themselves for sure. Progress rarely comes from having all the answers. It comes from recognizing what is missing and being open to the people who can help fill the gap. As you think about today's conversation, consider where you might be trying to push forward on your own and where the right person could help you see things differently. Thanks for taking a walk with us. We'll see you next time.